gold sponsors, Juniper and Boeing. And before we transition to the next segment, I want to give a little bit introduction. As you know, the theme of our convention is sustainable technology and innovations. Innovation and sustainable technologies are imperative for survival in the next decade. We all know what's happening with global warming, what's happening with climate. For adaptive, sustainable supply chains to become carbon neutral, to adopting mandates emerging from United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, leaders across industries, universities, and organizations are forced to be prepared for the unexpected. What are public and corporate leaders doing in this realm, and how are they supporting the commercial entities with their jurisdiction? The amazing panel that we've assembled for you for the next 55 minutes or so consists of academics, influential leaders, and CXOs who are coming from 3 different countries, and in fact on 3 different continents. So I'm pleased to welcome our international speakers here from Singapore, India, London, and US. And here, I want to first just introduce the moderator, Kunal Sood. My friend Kunal is an entrepreneur, founder of XFellows and We the Planet. He is an internationally renowned impact entrepreneur and an award-winning disruptive innovator. From serving in the slums of Mumbai as a global health scientist with Harvard at Pukar, to building global movements at the United Nations General Assembly with world leaders, explorers, and artists, Kunal is on a mission to make the impossible possible as a founder of XFellows, Novus, and We the Planet. Forbes named him an impact icon and highlighted him as a movement builder, given his extraordinary work as the founding curator for TEDx at the United Nations and launching a series of highly successful global campaigns such as Operation Hope, SDG Innovation, SDG Moonshots, First Woman, and Never Alone. I can go on and on about his credentials, but he has a passion for learning. He's a lifelong learner, having 5 master's degrees, including an MA from CIS, MSc from UCSF, MBA from Kellogg at Northwestern University, and MA MPhil from University of Pennsylvania. And now I know that he's on his path to PhD as well. So he started his career in the fashion and wellness industry. Think about that, the diversity of thoughts coming in here. In New York City 20 years ago, after graduating from Parsons School of Design, before dedicating his life's purpose towards transforming the world and positively impacting 1 billion lives in his lifetime. Audacious goal, I must say. And Kunal, my friend, welcome. Great to see you. Till now, we have never met face to face, and this is awesome that you have an amazing panel. And I know whatever situation you are thrown into, you make the best of it. And because of COVID, I was not able to talk to you for the last 3 weeks, but here we are. Thank you so much. And please take it away with your panel. And I will play your slides.
Thank you, Piyush. Appreciate you. I don't have slides because I'm the moderator.
I have your slides. So whenever you say
for the moderators, okay, for the panelists, yeah.
Yes.
And yes. I just want you to know that all of those accolades, the only one that's missing, which my dad wished I always had, was being an engineer, because our family business and all my life, I was groomed to be an engineer, and I feel like an infidel because I didn't succeed. But
so Kunal, tell your dad after this panel and after this convention that a friend of yours told you that you are now an honorary engineer by virtue of being in the ASEI convention. All right?
Deeply honored, and I think my dad will jump
awesome.
The roof as soon as he hears that. So without further ado, guys, I'm just the conduit and the moderator that's going to put you through the next 55 minutes as we have seen. I would love to begin with the idea of women. And one of the campaigns that I launched along with an extraordinary team 2 years ago was called First Woman. And today we have 3 extraordinary women, not just one. And first woman was the idea of putting the first woman on the moon before it had actually become the Artemis project with NASA. We launched this at the Tribeca Film Festival, and it was mostly around the idea of how women are going to be the reason why and how we protect, preserve, and save the planet in the future. So this is a very important conversation around sustainability and innovation, but mostly how if we allow, not only allow, but honor women first and let them lead our world into the future, we will have a true shot at human life flourishing again. And without further ado, I would like to invite these extraordinary women onto the stage. All right, we're going to start with Bhavna. Hi, Bhavna, and then Rajashri. And then we have Dr. Preeti Parekh, which shares the name of my best friend growing up in my life. So nice to meet all of you virtually, and thank you for being here. I would love to give the floor to, I think, Bhavna, you're going to go first. Please take the floor and tell us why you do what you do and share with us a little vision of how, sustainability and innovation is going to change our world for a better future in the future.
Thank you, Kunal. And personally, after hearing all of those things that you have and you represent and you have done, I don't say engineering is a medal that you need. You've earned much more than that. So congratulations and wonderful to meet you. As virtual as it is, but wonderful to meet you.
Thank you.
So wonderful question you posed. Why do I do what I do? And I had to think about it. And I went multiple years back. The reason, to be honest, goes way back when I used to help my dad, who is an electronics engineer, with building the electronic gadgets such as radio or light sensitive or clap sensitive switches, etc. And that was when I decided to take electronics as my career and did my bachelor's in electronics. And with digital electronics as my favorite subject, there was something about something fascinating about writing assembly language in 8086 microprocessor, which was attractive to me, and I continued the path into software engineering as a career. But why I do what I do, primarily, with 2 decades of experience in building and leading talented teams of engineers, scaling technology and for a global usage and tech transformations across the board. Primarily at the heart of every role that I took, it was a mission of the work that I'm doing and how I'm impacting the millions and millions of users who are using it. And as currently as SVP of at Auth0, which just got acquired by Okta as well, our goal again is to help with the consumer identity and authentication authorization space, but primarily again with the goal and the mission of helping developers across global bring their ideas, as I was hearing previous panelists talking about, bringing ideas forth. That's our job, enabling them so they don't have to focus on the heavy, authentication, security, and all of those things, and then bring their ideas much faster. And we have, I would say, have had successful trajectory there. But then connecting it back to, as a company, what are we doing? And just sharing a little bit about what Okta has achieved as 100% renewable electricity was the goal that they came up with. And we just launched it in 2020. And they came up with that, they decided to have that goal. And I'm proud to say that I work at this company, which has achieved 100% renewable electricity for global Okta offices, including the co-working spaces and global employee work from home electricity consumption. And the goal of that primarily was, or the way they achieved was, by buying or purchasing renewable energy certificates and many other things and certification around that. But at the core of every company and the mission that I work with and what we offer to even if it's tech, to offer to the world is primarily helping make an impact to a large group of users. And as you can see, pandemic has led to many of the impact, and technology has come through, if you think about it, with communication, with digitization, enabling, staying at home and getting all the stuff that people can buy. Technology is at the root of, I would say, making a difference in this pandemic. And I would say I'm one part of that big ecosystem, doing my role or playing my role.
Oh my God, without technology, I would be in a mental asylum. So God bless the engineers that have given us all of the technologies that exist, from Zoom to the room, whatever exists in my room, like the Apple Macintosh laptop and the iPhone. I'm a little bit of an iPhone junkie, so Apple junkie. So yes, I agree with you completely. I know you had some slides, and I wonder if this is a good time for us to dive into those slides, if that's possible, Piyush, so that we can go deeper into her story.
Sure. Whose story you want to go, Bhavna or
Let's go to Bhavna
Preeti?
first, and then
Okay.
Preeti, and
The order
we'll.
may be incorrect, so bear with me. I did not realize that you had changed that, so let's go.
There we go.
Thank you, Piyush, and thank you, Kunal. I would summarize that, but I think again going back to the introduction that I gave, technology is at the heart of many, I would say, enablement that happened as part of the pandemic, and I would say cloud was at the core, and I just wanted to share in a short time period as to how cloud adoption made a huge uptick for innovation as well as, I would say, enablement through pandemic. So just speaking to that, if you look at it, and if you can go to the next slide, thank you, Piyush. The future of work is changing. Before pandemic, just the adoption of this hybrid world or even work from home was never heard of. It was just once in a while folks would work from home. And primarily was very part of the software industry or tech world. So it's changing, and as you can see, cloud computing, which was touted as for its ability, like flexibility or reliability or scalability, has emerged as one of the few saving graces for business during the pandemic. Even without the pandemic, the cloud-based tools were surging in popularity, but now the demand, I would say, it has skyrocketed. And I just wanted to share a few themes here as to what are those trends, and of course, how it has enabled innovation in this world. In this new world as part of this deck. So I'll be as summarized as possible. And just to go to the next slide, if I can share some data here, actually, because of course data speaks much more volume than just words. As you look at this graph, and as you orient yourself, I would say this graph or information is coming from Flexera 2021 State of the Cloud report. And you can look at different slices, but of course, total and enterprise and SMB breakdown. But if you look at the data slice overall, 90% of the people who were sampled said cloud usage is higher than initially planned due to pandemic. And some of these increases as a result of extra capacity needed for current cloud-based applications to meet increased demand as online usage grew. But another reason for this increase is some organizations accelerated their migration plans from data centers to cloud in response of reduced headcount, because that was another one that led to, as part of this COVID, difficulties in accessing data center facilities or delays in hardware supply chain. So these were all, as you know, supply chain, maybe it will come in a conversation as well, is a big, I would say, industry organization that has been impacted by this COVID. So as the pandemic runs its course, we might see more and more organizations find that public cloud providers offer a more reliable option for business continuity. So just to talk about in the next slide, what are the trends that are picking up pace? So 4 trends is what I'm calling out here, of course. Going cloud native. So as next step, organizations are moving towards cloud native systems that are designed to embrace rapid change, large scale, and resilience. These systems are optimized for cloud scale and performance as they leverage to the underlying cloud infrastructure as part of its cloud instead of installing on OS or server. Microservices, containerization, and well-defined declarative APIs are all the hallmarks of course, the cloud native infrastructure. But the second one, which is truly, I would say, making a big surge in the industry, or the digitization I would call out, is API-driven tech. What does that mean? The API market is now a multi-trillion-dollar economy with tens and thousands of APIs on web. And maybe if I give some examples, it might be more clear. So some of the examples I would share here is e-commerce, shipping, logistics, Shippo, Payments industry, Stripe, the names you must have heard. Communication solutions offered as communication as a service by Twilio, used by many companies in many industries. If you go to fintech or banking sector, we have Alloy offering know your customer concept, bank fraud prevention solutions as API, Coda offering collaborative dev solutions. So you can see so many companies are, I would say, disrupting and innovating using the API first technology. So I want to call out, this is a very big trend in a strong startup market coming up around behind this trend. The third thing I would call out are data privacy and security. This is certainly the adoption of cloud computing does raise the challenge of evolving cybersecurity threats and new and competing privacy regulations across various jurisdictions. So just want to call out, this is another trend to keep in mind. And of course, every company and every leader has to ensure that they have the current knowledge or the up-to-date knowledge of where these regulations are, especially when they move from country to country or go into global market.
Before you run away with this, I just want to ask you, because not everyone here is an engineer, so teach me what an API is.
Oh yeah, think of it, API is, you know, a lot of times we interact with a screen or product and all of that, but many times a company is just an API, which means your product, your company has to integrate and call that, you can say, software. Okay, so it doesn't have a front end. It's not a, I would say, consumer driven, something that you can interact with, but it does offer a solution. So for example, when I called out payments industry, Stripe, they have an API with which if you are building an application and you need a payment service, you can just integrate, or your technology can just integrate with their product, and that's it. You know, you have a payment solution on your site. Auth0 also provides that, which is for authentication. If you have a login box, all you have to create is integration with that login box with our product. It's an API, and very easily it integrates, and you know your login just works seamlessly.
Thank
so
you.
basically,
I just
the
wanted
idea
that
is
basic overview, because you know you're the hare and I'm the tortoise, and I'm trying to hold on to you. It's been amazing so far. Thank you. It's been a very, very compelling reason why we should go to the cloud.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I'll stop here, and I'll you know, give it back to Kunal, you and you know, other panelists. But looking forward to the conversation.
No, this is amazing. You know, I couldn't agree more. Personally speaking, I was forced into the cloud during the lockdown. I used to love doing summits in person at the United Nations or at TED, at Singularity University. And all of a sudden, I had to use this 2D version of me, which I'm getting used to, but without, you know, the API. And I think all of these principles of fail fast and then scale fast, and then, you know, the API first and managed services and auto scaling, it's all so necessary here and now for sustainable as well as exponential development for the future. So thank you for that extraordinary takeaway. I would love now to go to Preeti. Preeti, hi, welcome. Why don't you tell us what drives you and why do you do the work you do in our sustainable and hopeful future?
So good morning, afternoon, evening. I mean, this is the power of technology, which brings together some of the finest minds. I mean, without those technologies, we would not be here having those discussions. I mean, in a way, when Bhavna was telling her story, I was smiling because my dad is also a civil engineer. And that, in effect, got me excited about engineering. I remember as a teenager, my dad worked in providing infrastructure, improving living conditions in slums. And as a teenager, I used to go around in slums, engaging with local communities. And at some point, the penny dropped that I live in a comfortable house with toilets and taps and electricity, but those people don't. And that got me really charged up and geared up about engineering, infrastructure, and sustainable development.
That's amazing. You know, I was in the slums too, not as an engineer, which my dad would have loved, but as a global health scientist. And I worked with Harvard to understand the mental health adversities as well as the global health adversities that affect slums. So that's pretty extraordinary that your father, as well as you, holding on to that legacy to transform those, you know, adverse living conditions into better ones for the future. So That's amazing.
Absolutely. And Kunal, you'll be surprised to know that as an engineer, I do not work with engineers. I work with people from health, geography, anthropology, social science, planning, architecture, and geography. I mean, there's a running joke about people asking me, are you sure are you an engineer? And I respond back saying, yes, I'm definitely an engineer, but an engineer who likes to open up and branch into different disciplines, because it's an age where we need to collaborate. And I think one of my biggest frustrations, as you can see in the slide here, is how can a country with some of the finest, brilliant scientists, engineers, and minds on this planet not be able to fix our toilets, taps, and electricity? How is this possible? And this is the biggest frustration which gets me out of bed every morning to do what I do, which is to engage with policymakers and practitioners and companies using high quality research to say, here is the business case for why you need to invest in infrastructure in resource challenge settings, whether they are slums, remote villages, refugee camps. Look at the solutions. I mean, the photographs, they're such shoddy solutions. And I mean, surely the story goes that we can do better than those type of solutions. We have them in our houses. And this question really troubles me and gets me up, wakes me up in the night as to why can we not fix this, simply put.
I think that's a very, very compelling question. You know, if you lead with a question, you often get more solutions than if you lead with the solution.
Absolutely.
And everyone goes home and thinks the work is done. So I do love what you put out here, because that was the first problem I saw when I was in the slum too, was portable water that, you know, contributes to so many kids dying and so many diseases that exist. And I agree with you, there's so much more we can do to create a better life for everyone, you know, where no one's left behind. So thank you for that.
And I mean, I think the public health motivation is very well known. And in a way, COVID has brought those inequities to the forefront. COVID is really highlighting that if there's a lack of equity, lack of infrastructure in society, the ones who are underprivileged suffer the most from COVID, suffer the most from poverty. But there's another reason why infrastructure is important. In India, I interviewed 100 slum dwellers, 100 households, and I asked them the question before they had infrastructure and after they had infrastructure to say, if you had $100 and if you had to pick your 3 items to invest, where would you put your $100? And before they had infrastructure, they said water, sanitation, roads, electricity, so infrastructure. But after they had infrastructure, they flipped and they said, no, now we want to think about health and education and employment and land tenure. So basically, infrastructure is an enabler because it stops people from fighting daily battles, from surviving to becoming engaged citizens, to having a better quality of life. So infrastructure is not just about providing water, sanitation, electricity itself. It really frees up time and resources for people to move to the next ladder in life. It shifts our needs and aspirations from lower order aspirations to higher order aspirations.
You know,
so I don't know, Kunal, if that makes sense.
It resonates to the depths of my core, because everything you've said around infrastructure is what I feel the government should truly invest in over the next, forget decades to come. You know, we should just keep leapfrogging around how can we create better infrastructure. And this is why I really say and believe that if we put more women in charge, this home, and by the way, this is not me, this is research on the ground that proves that when you put a woman in charge, she makes the impossible possible, grounded in the reality of what's necessary for human flourishing in the home, outside the home, in the community, and as a nation. So I would completely endorse everything I've heard. And thank you for this. It's been pretty extraordinary. It took me back to my favorite time as a global health scientist. So thank you for that. And next, yeah.
And 2 billion people on this planet do not have decent sanitation. This is 2 billion out of around 7 billion people. So I got fed up with the situation. I developed a team which included people from health and social sciences and planning and said, let's look at the evidence. So we looked at around 600 publications globally for sanitation, and we mapped them across the 169 SDG targets, the Sustainable Development Targets. And we found that if you invest in sanitation, it hits all 17 goals and 130 out of 169 targets. So basically, now we take this evidence to policymakers, and we are working with the government in South Africa, for example, and we are telling them pretty much, if you want to achieve the sustainable development goals, if you really are serious about sustainability, you have to invest in sanitation. And look, here's the evidence. You need to get your ministries of health and education and people working in climate to all talk to each other. If you do not work together, you cannot achieve sustainable development because you do not have infrastructure. So this is the evidence I was very keen to present, because I find that this evidence is really helpful in giving the nudge or the push that private sector, public sector requires to invest more in infrastructure and take it seriously for sustainable development.
I think what you've just hit on the head, the crisis that pervades us all. In fact, disease comes from lack of hygiene. A lot of people believe that COVID-19 or superviruses or superbugs do come from the fact that we don't have enough infrastructure around solving for this global grand challenge. There's a friend of mine called Jack Sim who made a movie called Mr. Toilet. And actually Modi, as well as another friend of mine, John Kluge, that started Toilet Hackers, have done a ton of work to try and solve for this problem. But there's so much work necessary, and I think this really drives home a real solution. So thank you so much for the extraordinary work you're doing, Dr. Parekh.
No worries. I think maybe I should stop here. I do have a couple of other slides, but I'm conscious that you want to also keep the...
I'm getting more and more excited about each slide, so please, I think you can definitely don't leave us in suspense. All right, here we go. Sustainable Development Goals in action. As a spider chart. I love it.
So our world is a complicated place. And whether we take sanitation, whether we take COVID, what we've seen is that there is this knock-on effect. So as a result of COVID, it's not just about health, but it has an impact on education. It has an impact on mental health. It has an impact on the economy. And similarly, we argue the case through such complex visuals, which is driven by evidence. This is driven by those 600 academic papers to say, look, if you invest in sanitation, it also has an impact on girls going to school. So we draw kind of this intercomplex webs to show this is why complexity is important, but also this is why collaboration is important. We cannot just as engineers sit in our disciplinary silos and say, we'll only focus on the engineering. We have to talk to experts in health. We have to form partnerships with people in psychology and social sciences to tackle the behavioral aspect of this as well. But this is to make the case to governments to say, you need to get your ministers to sit down together and come up with joined up policies. You cannot just focus on one element.
I agree. You have to really frame your mindset around, taking the SDG framework into action. And you can call it the decade of action, but unless you really do something like you just elucidated so effectively, it's all selfie moments and, feeling good about solving for global grand challenges that you never really get into really solving for. So thank you for that. And I'm so excited about the next slide. There we go.
So this is about climate justice. So climate is another area, climate and renewable energy is another area we work in. And once again, my big frustration is that the people who are most vulnerable due to the effects of climate change, they live in low middle income countries. But those poorest 50% of the population are only responsible for 10% of the emissions per capita. But yet they bear the burden of climate change. On top of that, they bear the burden of poor infrastructure. So if you put the two together, they bear the burden and injustice of this all. But somehow it feels at the moment that there's a lot of pressure on those groups to reduce emissions, where it should be the other way around, where we should be taking it up with the high emitters to say, look, you need to now take climate change seriously and contribute to the agenda with loss and damages and investing in infrastructure. Now, the big question we have is if 2 billion people on this planet do not have sanitation, if nearly 1 billion people do not have energy, how can we increase access to infrastructure, but do it in a way where we meet the climate goals? And therefore, I'm interested in renewable energy, where I'm working with the private sector who provide individual solar home systems in very remote villages in Africa. And what is exciting here is we're working with people who've never used electricity in their lives before. And this is the 21st century. And we do not have a clue of how they will use electricity, what type of appliances they will need in the future. But what the company has done is they have a pay-as-you-go system so people can pay their bills on their phones as they go along. And they collect very nuanced data on how people use energy. So someone in a village in Rwanda will switch on a light bulb and we get the data here. Don't ask me how, because I'm a civil engineer. You guys probably know how you can do this. But the advantage of that is we're now modeling energy consumption for those households to understand what their current needs are and what they'll need in the future, so that we can influence the industry, we can influence the sector to say, please design this type of appliances. Please take into consideration that people will use lights and mobile phones for X, Y, Z, to really shape issues around energy and climate, because I think it's important understanding those behaviors and patterns.
Amazing. You know, there's about, I think, almost 100 million in India alone that will be affected through the climate refugee crisis in the next 10 to 20 years, according to the UN. So you know, I really love that solution that you've outlined. So thank you for that.
And I don't know, maybe, I mean, I don't need to go through this slide. This is just thinking about what engineering leadership should be in the 21st century. So just some ideas to put out there. And I think this is something we can possibly pick up in our kind of panel discussion as well. But thinking about frugality, but simplicity and the multiplier effect. So whatever we do needs to have some form of multiplier effect or value. There needs to be value addition and creation in whatever we do.
That's extraordinary. Doctor, now I want to ask you a question. What drives you? Tell me a little bit about you, because you've done an extraordinary job saving the world and giving us a framework of how we can join you in that inspired vision of saving the world. But tell me a little bit about Preeti Parekh and how does she do what she does and how does she engineer leadership for our future?
So as I said, for me, it's part frustration that in my mind, as an engineer, we're trained to be logical. So in my mind, I think, we know how to design toilets and taps and lights, and why can we not do it? So it's that challenge which really gets me excited, which gets me out of bed. Also, what I found a gap in the market is that a lot of engineering programs until now were very much focused on, say, electrical engineering or chemical engineering and learning those basic design skill sets which we need. But I feel there's a gap in thinking more beyond engineering, thinking about interdisciplinarity, about collaboration, about the systems approach. I think as engineers, we need to be trained to be non-linear. We need to be trained to be more adventurous, learning from our mistakes. I know that came up in the previous panel discussion, but thinking really about how to make the case for engineering better. I mean, to be honest, as engineers, I don't think we are good speakers. I don't think we really promote the case of why engineering and infrastructure is important at all. We rarely enter politics. So the problem is there's always an under-recognition of our sector, and there's always under-investment in our sector. So I think my passion is to change all of that. So I do a lot of things, other things like stand-up comedies, and I engage a lot with media as well. Just bring awareness of why engineering is important. I have a stand-up comedy about poo. If you're interested, I'll share the link later. But it's all means of getting people to realize that engineering is a noble profession and getting policymakers and the private sector to realize that they need to invest more in engineering solutions, the value of engineering.
No, I love that. You know, a friend of mine, Dr. Jennifer Aker, just like you, she's a professor at Stanford, and she uses humor now in the boardroom as well as the classroom at Stanford Business School. So the idea of humor and comedy and just lightening up a little bit as we move into an exponential world from one that was much more linear before. And everything you've said really is true, that we should invest not just money, but our time, our treasures, and our faith in engineers in and around politics. And I fully agree with that. So thank you. Thank you for that.
If I can plus one to what Preeti just said in terms of technology and what engineering can do, I just want to also call out that investment in technology, or you can say focus on technology, can also help with equitable access. It crosses barrier when you have a technology solving the problem because it's not focused on any kind of bias, right? So I just want to plus one to that, Preeti, in terms of your list.
So amazing. Thank you, Rajashri, for being so patient. Now we finally come to you. I would love for you to share with us, your story and why do you do what you do? I know we've had the pleasure of talking. I've had the special pleasure of talking to you and learning about the extraordinary work you've done in your past, but the even more extraordinary work you're looking into the future for. So the stage is yours.
Thank you, Kunal, and a very happy New Year and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all the panelists and the distinguished members and speakers and all the audience who's being a part of this fantastic conference. Piyush, thank you so much. It's a privilege to be here. Yeah, it's a interesting question that you asked me. I don't want to bore people, but I'll just give you a little tidbits from my story on how I journeyed here. It all began with IBM, my career. I'm a BCom graduate, not an engineer, and dropped out of MBA thrice because my dream was to go to Harvard, which never happened. I ended up in IBM. I didn't know what IBM was altogether when I joined in 2001. It just came my way, and I took the job there. As I started and I continued, in my first job as a Marcom, I sort of enjoying technology. It became like my passion. Though I don't know what technology meant much. It just became a passion. And at that time, I was asked to share what is my aspiration. I don't want to name the person or anything, but one of my managers asked me, please share your aspiration. So I just gave my aspiration saying, I want to grow my career as a leader in IBM. And at that time, I was ridiculed and told that IBM doesn't hire people who don't have an MBA. And you don't have an MBA and you can't make it in IBM. And to me, that was very disappointing. And it's not like, you don't want to go or, study. Whatever the circumstances, everybody had their own challenges. And I was very vocal about it. But I was very good at my job. And I made it my, somebody says you can't do it. And that's my challenge. And I made it personal. It was very personal to me. And I said, more than me deserving IBM, IBM deserves me. And I'm going to show what I can do here. And with that passion, I grew. I continued. I moved to different departments and things. And I finally ended up, interestingly, in a role where I had to work with all the architects, engineers, and geeks. Again, I was put into managing all these bunch of people. Again, I faced the same brunt where, oh, she's not an engineering background. She doesn't know technology. And this was constantly given to me, despite me doing fantastic. And I was recognized at a global level. I was known as a top talent. And everybody said it's Rajshree's model in a leadership team saying, if anything is impossible, go to her, she'll make it possible. So I was continuing with getting my accolades and everything, but still people had this a perception that only if you're an engineer, can you work for an IT company? And that got to me very personally, I said, you can't determine anyone why they do what they do because of, whether you have a certain education, certain background. And then as I ended, of course, I worked in India, US, Singapore. And eventually there was a point when I was working in Singapore for driving the Smart Nation initiatives for the Singapore government and public sector under the PMO's office. I was asked to, highlight the challenges on what's happening, why IoT is not being successful, why Singapore Smart Nation initiative was not getting successful. And at that time, I was told to write articles. The first thing that came out as a response to my preceptor was, I'm not a techie. I'm not an engineering, I'm not an engineer. I can't write technology articles. He was aghast at my response. And subconsciously, I had let that affect me. And that time, what my preceptor did, just to help me get out of that mindset, he wrote my first article and said, go publish on LinkedIn. And I did. And later he just encouraged me saying, no, you've done this. You work for, the Smart Nation initiatives. You're doing everything on ground. You know it. You're an influencer sales. You know what technology means. And since then, once I started, there was a moment which happened. It was a eureka moment. And I know I can do it. And I came out of that situation that I put myself into. And since then, there's no looking back. And today, I'm one of the technologists. I'm Thinkers Top 360, top 50 global influencers and thought leaders in AI, cloud computing, blockchain, AR, VR, 5G, you name it. And I'm also the Global Director General for, the Sustainable Development Goals for GCP-IT as an industry body. I champion open innovation. And my focus is on ensuring the world understands what reality about sustainable innovation means. We are just talking, but there is too much that is there which we are not paying attention to, and that is affecting the way we live, work, communicate, and do things in our life. And to me, that's been where I understood empowerment is not something that you can give from outside. It is me who has to empower myself. So I decided that I realized one fine day that, I have to give back in this world, and for which I need to make a difference. And empowerment is going back to your roots. So I decided to move back to India. And today I've, ventured on a journey where I have established a foundation just as we speak last year, 2 months ago, where I want to create, smart, intelligent, self-sustaining, living place on planet Earth for socio-economic empowerment, beginning from the roots, which is the villages, and take this model globally.
That's
a little bit
what you said just now is so important, because I learned from my mentor that in order to have effective and meaningful outward impact, you have to have inner transformation. And, when we talked about this, you told me about the journey that you took and, how you've taken this beyond engineering, almost like, to quote one of the celebrity gurus, but you have a guru who's not a celebrity guru, but someone who's on the ground doing extraordinary work with you in the villages. But Sadhguru calls it inner engineering, right? And we've seen this extraordinary through line of engineering leadership, engineering society, inner engineering, and now you're talking about engineering Bhavna, you're engineering the clouds, or perhaps even the heavens, if you want to call it that, the virtual heavens at least. And Rajshri, you're talking about the villages, the heart of India, what drives us, and I'd love for you to share a little bit more about that, because we have only, I think, if I'm correct, time check wise, we have about 5 more minutes. Is that correct, Piyush?
Okay.
Yeah, Kunal, you can go for 7 more minutes.
Okay, great.
And by the way, I'm showing something on the screen for everyone to know that there is this souvenir where you can find on aseiusa.org/NC. And from that souvenir, if you go to the hamburger menu, you can get to the details of our messages as well as everybody's resumes. And the fact that Kunal did not read out resumes of these amazing women, I am just highlighting that you don't need to be an engineer to be a technology leader. So Raj's resume is here. For some reason, I call her Raj. I have called her Raj for many, many years now. But this is the official resume, and you can see what a great thought leader she is. And also the fact that Dr. Preeti Parekh here won the top award. She's the top 100 thinkers, academics in the UK in climate. In fact, it's a world stage, right? And we did not introduce her properly. So I'll put her.
No worries, no problem. Just now,
I cringe when people read my resume, because I'm like, no, don't say that. Let them Google me if they need to, because the truth is, I want my energy to come out.
All of you are so extremely humble, and you will never talk about yourself. So I need to do this thing. So that's why I'm showing this. Next will be Preeti's, and then I'll put, well, I've already read yours, so you won't get another chance.
I was pretty cringy, to be honest with you.
Okay. All right, I take it back. So.
No, but we love you. What I'd love to do is like ask them a question about, the future of sustainability and innovation, because I'm sure all of these extraordinary women who are the secret to our future probably have a little insight to share with us around, just one hope for the future. I'd love for you guys to use the last 7 minutes we have to just share what you'd want to see happen going forward in your field of expertise, or just your hope and your wish for society and sustainability, and how can we really, make the impossible possible together. Perhaps start with Bhavna, because we haven't heard from you for a while.
So, Kunal, I think I can summarize everybody's conversation here, and I think that would be the answer of this question as well, because everybody here, and I want to say I'm very impressed by both you, Preeti, and Rajshri. Primarily, the goal of sustainability, climate change is real. I don't think anybody can deny that. Plus, the aspect of taking care of climate and Earth is also on us humans, as we ourselves so-called the smartest race on Earth. It's on our shoulder to actually take care of the very Earth that we all live in for ourselves and for our generations. So sustainability is a big aspect of that very theme, and you can't make it any you can't, that theme or mission cannot be more close to you just by the fact that it's an aspect of our generation and keeping it together. So how can we, I'll speak to the technology aspect, and I'm sure the other ladies will speak and resonate with their background, of course. But something that I do feel strongly is technology is an equitable medium to get the solutioning or get the power of what we are trying to solve to everybody. Right. And that's the basis. As Preeti, you were talking about, there's such divide in, the impact of even pandemic to the poor and to the non-poor. We are hearing about countries where their second and third boosters are being in place, while there are countries where the first dose isn't even reached, right? Yeah. The big aspect, that's what I feel about technology, and that's why, I feel technology can, in many ways, bring solutions forward, because it's an equitable access that we can provide to everyone. Now, the question is how committed we are. I think that's where we need to start investing ourselves. I'm certainly making sure that wherever possible, I can volunteer, make my commitments possible. And that's what, us human, I think we need to take a pledge towards.
I love that. Thank you so much. I couldn't agree more. Technology can democratize so much more than we ever could do with anything else. And you engineers are the ones that are making the impossible possible. So thank you. I'd love to go to Dr. Parekh. I'd love your thoughts on, a hopeful future and what an insight you have that would, you could leave the audience and the engineers future, as well as, titans like Piyush who love embarrassing us, especially me. I feel very embarrassed when people tell me who I am on screen. So thank you, Piyush.
Thank you. I mean, first of all, I want to say it's such an inspiring panel. I've been feeling so inspired when I hear your stories, Kunal, Bhavna, and Rajashri. It's especially Rajashri, your kind of persistence. I mean, similarly in my career, there are a lot of times when people have said, "Oh no, this is not possible," or "What are you doing?" And you're not a standard academic, and academics don't do this. They're supposed to do this and this. So you constantly get challenged. And I think one of the big lessons, personal lessons, is you have to be very resilient to institute a change. Resilience is key in whatever profession you are in. I'm excited about the future because when I speak with my students who are the next generation, they're really switched on about climate change. They're really switched on when it comes to sustainability issues. And they're constantly knocking on our doors, challenging us to do better. I think what is important is combining technology with the kind of moral compass so that people start thinking about justice and those issues when they design technical solutions to make sure that the solutions are just and equitable and fair to everyone on this planet. But I'm very hopeful because when I have those discussions with my students, they're always thinking about those issues. They have a much greater awareness of those issues compared to, say, when I was a teenager. So I'm cautiously optimistic and positive about the future of our planet.
I love cautious optimism because it allows us to be grounded in reality. So thank you for that. Rajashri, your hope for the future?
I'm going to give a small research which I had done a while ago, and this is something I've been discussing with the people, with the thought leaders and the leaders across the globe. So when we say sustainable innovation or sustainability, we always think that what we are developing with the technology, that it is not going to have any effect or any kind of issues around it. But what we fail to understand is, are we really doing sustainability is a question that I always have. This is a very important research which was conducted. This is a documentary on DW, and it was about what does it really mean in developing the silicon. We are today, if you look at it, the world is using all the chips. We are literally powered, whether it's laptops, computers, cars, you name it. And we also experienced, due to pandemic, a lot of disruption, within the semiconductor industry and all that. But have you ever understood what goes in making the silicon? We have been told it is used making sand, right? But sand has impurities, and that's not what it takes. it takes a very high quality quartz, which is mined in spruce pine in North Carolina. And along with the piece of carbon, these two components are, is burnt together, is together burnt at a 1800 degree temperature. And what remains of that is the metal, the component called silicon, which is nothing but a piece of carbon. And that is what we are still using. So where is the question of carbon net neutral? There is a paper on this. There are a lot of research being done. So my question to everybody is, what is sustainability then? We're talking about too much of sustainability. And if I really have to go, I can take on different aspects of this area, whether you take it in fashion industry, whether you take it in, we're talking of biomass fuel, or you take in alternative energy, or you're talking about renewable energy. There is nothing that's happening. We're all fooling ourselves telling we are doing sustainability, but it's just been talks. On ground, there is nothing happening. On the contrary, the planet is having more adverse effects. And this is a burning issue which the world has to address. And of course, I'm a small fish in this ocean, but I want to make a difference in whatever capacity that I can by voicing it out, by writing through my articles, by telling the world the truth. And that's what I'm doing. And today I'm leaving with this question to all of you. How would you make technology, one, is inclusive? And how do we bring digital inclusion in the world? And the next thing is, how much are you going to contribute towards sustainability? And that also begins at, how many cars do you want to want? How much of desires do you have? Can we reduce? And that's what I want to leave with. And thank you for this wonderful opportunity.
Extraordinary. I mean, to leave with speaking truth to power is the best way we could leave this forum. To wrap it up, I would just want to say one thing. Since we've gone from London to Africa to Malaysia to the United States, there's an African proverb that if you want to go fast, you can go alone. But if you want to go far, you go together, right? We can teach you how to go fast. I mean, engineers know how to do that. It's like rapid iteration, fail fast, break, build, right? But if you want to go far, you go with the team. So what I've learned in this new age is that with technology, we can go further and faster than we ever have before. And with that, I would lay to all of you extraordinary women that you are the secret to our future success. And us men, if we can unite with you, I truly believe the essence of humanity is when men and women can unite, we can make the impossible possible. So with that, I'm honored to be a part of this group. Piyush, my gratitude to you for inviting me. And Surbhi, and of course the Vatsalas and the team behind this. I know how much work it takes, and thank you for having me. It's been a privilege.
Thank you, Kunal, for being here, and to all our eminent panelists. So wonderful to see you live. We live in the world through our mobile devices, and sometimes we respond in time and sometimes not. So I apologize if I haven't gotten back to you promptly.
Oh, please, you've battled COVID, which is, you make me feel like, yeah, well, see, at least now you're having a vulnerable moment, but thank you.
No, I'm recovered, thankfully. I'm just waiting for second negative test, and then I can perhaps go out. So thank you so much for being here.
Great.
Kunal, I will catch up with you, and each of you, there will be a follow-up, because there is a question in the panel. If you see, somebody suggesting, Paul Singh is suggesting that there is an attempt by ASEI to launch sanitation projects and in 2013. So we'll talk more about it offline. We are running out of time. So let's get to a follow-up session with Paul and others. And I'm sure some of you would be interested in collaborating with us, but I know Bhavna certainly is collaborating with me for the next initiative. So I'll urge all of you to stay in touch with me and with ASEI. So thank you.